to get us going, and we will rock and roll here. So welcome everyone to the National FairTax webinar for April in 2015. We're into our 6th year of the webinar, and my colleague Larry and I have been partners in crime for that entire time, and it's been an amazing ride. Educated literally thousands of people through this platform and through this forum, and just pretty neat that we have the opportunity to do it. And we, most importantly, we wouldn't have the opportunity to do it without people actually being here. So thank you for those of you who have joined us. I'm just going to check in for a second, and I'm going to ask people to type in the chat line to make sure that they can hear me okay. I've gotten a notice from GoToWebinar saying that there's been some technical issues. So I just want to check in before I get rolling here and have people write in and make sure that they can hear me loud and clear. If you go ahead and do that, it'd be great.
I can hear you fine, Mark.
Okay, good. Perfect. Thank you, Lynn. Thank you, Ron. Got some good questions already. Thank you, Larry. All right. So let's get started here. And one of the things, the ways that I've always liked presenting with respect to the FairTax is that it's, we like to say three things: simple, fair, and transparent. We'll talk about all those things, and this is a great slide, looking at your screen right now, to get a real clear understanding of where we're at currently with our tax code. Over 74,000 pages. Impossible for any one individual to be up to speed on our tax code. It's just impossible. It's complex, it's convoluted, there's loopholes, and you know, I like to share that our country is, the United States of America is brilliant and amazing and the best country in the world because we've evolved in so many ways, so many important ways, so many crucial ways. Well, here's an opportunity for us to evolve that would really, put us back into the forefront of all superpowers in terms of our financial status, where we've certainly faltered over the last few years, and B, lead the way in terms of being an evolved, economically transparent, and progressive country in terms of its taxation, in terms of the way it funds its federal government. So as we'll talk about tonight, we'll see that the fair tax is extremely simple, and as a result, something that we absolutely need to look at, that our federal government and leaders in Congress need to look at as a way to lead the world in taxation and funding itself. All right. So with that being said, we talked about the current tax code being convoluted, and it really punishes growth and expansion. And you know, one of the things I like to say is that it inspires the wrong behavior, because hey, look, if when we make more money, the government takes more of it, and it's just inspiring the wrong behavior. So we're going to show you a way to do it in a more progressive, evolved way. So lack of transparency, extremely inefficient, impedes privacy, winners and losers in terms of loopholes, very laborious, and these are all the things that we want to avoid, and we believe the fair tax does exactly that. So the fair tax is legislation that's currently in Congress. These are the names of the bills in the House and in the Senate. And when we look at simplicity, the fair tax is 131 pages double-spaced. You could go to fairtax.org right now and actually download and print out this piece of legislation without burning through a ream of paper at your home printer. So simple, right? So let's look at how the fair tax, most importantly here as we really dive into this, let's look at how the fair tax supports economic growth. So most importantly, the fair tax is a consumption tax. It's not an income tax. And this is a key thing to understand, because A lot of people confuse the fair tax with the flat tax. The fair tax and the flat tax are two totally, entirely different pieces of legislation. Not only are they separate, not only are they actually different in terms of two different pieces of legislation, but in their makeup, they're completely different. See, the flat tax still taxes income, and the fair tax suggests that taxing income is archaic, and we're better off taxing consumption, and that's exactly what the fair tax does. So you pay taxes on what you spend, not on what you earn. And so all federal income-related taxes go away, and we repeal the 16th Amendment, which is Congress's ability to tax income. So these things are extremely important to understand and recognize. When the fair tax gets implemented, all these taxes go away. So federal, both personal and corporate income taxes go away, capital gains taxes, alternative minimum tax, all tax withholdings go away. So if you're currently working and employed by an employer, when you get your paycheck now, you have gross pay and net pay. And the net pay is the difference after tax withholdings come. Well, when the fair tax gets implemented, that gets eliminated. We take home what we earn. And think about this, ladies and gentlemen. The average American's income will increase by 29% under the fair tax. So it supports growth. You only pay money, I should say you only get taxed on what you spend, not on what you earn. So from that standpoint, that is a fundamental shift in how we're taxed and what occurs financially for every single business and individual. And that's really important to understand. So let's look at the fair tax and its benefits on business and trade. So think about this. There's $13 trillion in global U.S.-based assets that are parked offshore. And this is individual and corporate wealth that's sitting in these bank accounts to shield it from federal taxation. And when the fair tax gets implemented, this money is going to start to organically flow back into the U.S. because income taxes have gone away, both personally and corporately. Capital gains taxes go away. And so there was a survey done for wealthy people and business owners that asked them what they would do with their income if there was no more income tax. And the overall response was that they would invest in what they know best, which is to say their businesses. So we estimate that $1 trillion of money, of capital, would organically come back into the United States for the expansion of businesses that make a huge difference. The U.S. becomes a corporate headquarter haven. That would mean a lot more jobs. So we'd have the lowest federal corporate income tax rate than any other country in the world, 0. And that would make a big difference because a lot of companies would consider and actually bring their corporate headquarters to America and plant their flag and a stake in the ground that this would be their international headquarters, which means companies would have to staff, buildings would get erected, construction business would be at an all-time boom, and there'd just be a lot more opportunity. So that's a huge arrow in our quiver. And the underground economy, estimated at $2 trillion, pays their fair share. So right now you've got a lot of people avoiding the tax code. You've got undocumented immigrants who are avoiding the tax system. And every time with the fair tax that somebody goes and buys a pair of jeans or buys a new home or goes to the grocery store for that matter, they'll pay their fair share. And so we'll unpack that a little bit more as we get further in this. But we've got a much broader base, and everyone contributes. And right now, as most people on the line probably know, only about 50% of people are actually contributing real dollars to our tax system right now. Well, under the FairTax, virtually everyone would. And we'll, again, talk about that a bit more specifically. So, these are three basic reasons. There's certainly some more nuanced reasons, but when it comes to business and trade, we're going to be in a lot better position here. All right, so the FairTax is fully transparent. There's no loopholes, right? There's only one tax, a consumption tax on new retail goods and services to the tune of 23% on all receipts. Actually, let me back up for a second here. So think about this for a second. When you go to I said before, as an example, anybody who goes and buys a pair of jeans would pay their fair share. Well, think about this. So you go to the mall and you buy a pair of designer jeans for $100, which we can't believe it, but yes, they're $100. Some are a lot more expensive than that even. And the FairTax is inclusive. So when you see a price tag on a good, in this case, let's say jeans for $100, the FairTax is included in that number. So you wouldn't get to the cash register and then pay $100 times 23%, add that on. No, the FairTax is included. And that's it. It's on retail goods and services, right? So, and it'll say right on our receipt, 23%. Well, guess what? If Congress decides that they want to raise that number to 24, 25, 26, 27, 30%, well, we're going to know about that. It's going to be printed right on a receipt, whereas right now, with 75,000 pages in our tax code, we have no idea what they're doing to our tax code, guys. No idea. There's no transparency, and with the FairTax, we eliminate these loopholes. Simple, 23%, no national retail sales tax on goods and services, and that's it. So we eliminate that. Now, efficient, simple to collect. 45 states already collect a state sales tax. We will leverage that infrastructure. We will instantly get 80% more effective at collecting it because we go from 120 million households down to 18 to 20 million businesses. And there's one form to fill out. Here's my gross receipts for the month. I multiply that times 23%, and I send that money up to my state sales tax bureau. So it's very, very simple to collect that way. And now think about this. Currently, the IRS costs $13 billion to operate. Very inefficient. They only collect about 75% of the taxes that they could. And the FairTax would eliminate the IRS. Over a 3-year period, we would defund it and absolutely eliminate it. So we would eliminate an extremely expensive and inefficient body, and we would incentivize our state sales tax bureaus to collect by giving them 0.25% of what they collect, and that would be the revenue that they use to fund themselves and to police it. So very, very efficient. I mean, it just makes really a lot of sense. All right. So we protect our privacy. We don't turn in our tax return. Nobody knows how much we make. April 15th just becomes another spring day, right? That's one of the taglines that we love to say about the FairTax. No filling out detailed income tax forms. And, for me as a self-employed business owner, that's huge. All year long, I'm thinking about tax implications of things that I'm purchasing and depreciation over here and what I can write off into my taxes. And, it's just complicated, and it's very, pardon the pun, it's very taxing on me. It's very taxing on people. And it's a big old waste of time. And if you've read any of the FairTax books, which if you haven't, I encourage you to go find them, you'll see that the aggregate amount of time that businesses and business owners and individuals spend on thinking about tax implications, if we took an hourly rate of that, it's collective hundreds of billions of dollars based on the amount of time that goes into just thinking about taxes and dealing with tax implications. So with the FairTax, we get incredibly more efficient. All right. Fairness. The prebate. So some of you who've been on the line have obviously heard this and been very familiar with this, and some of you who this is potentially your first time seeing this, this is really important to know. The prebate is a part of the legislation that has been written that assures no one, regardless of income, not just lower income class Americans, but everyone, no one pays federal taxes up to the poverty line. So let's share a chart that shows you what we mean by this. So if you're looking at the screen here, move your eyeballs to the right-hand side of the screen, a two-adult household. Come down to what's highlighted in green. So let's say on average we got a two-adult household with 2 kids at home. Well, independently of the FairTax, the Department of Health and Human Services, a federal body, have determined what they call poverty threshold spending based on the size of your household. And so if you're looking at the green part of this chart, a 4-person household who spends at $31,860 a year is spending at the poverty level threshold, which means for that family, for that household, they're spending the most minimal amount of money just to meet their very bare basic needs, the poverty level limit, as we would say. And so at $31,860, at that level of spending, if you multiply that by the FairTax rate of 23%, you'd get $7,328. And that's how much you'd be spending in taxes. That's what your tax liability would be over the course of the year under the FairTax. And if you divide it by 12, you'd get $611. And so what the creators of the FairTax legislation wrote into the legislation was that that amount of money gets rebated to that family at the beginning of each month via direct deposit. And so that's fair, right? It just makes sense. So we're not going to penalize lower income class Americans for their income amount. We're going to look after them, and we're going to, we're not going to penalize anybody. And what I mean to say is we're not going to hurt lower income class Americans by having them pay a whole bunch of money that would really hurt them and affect their ability to just live at sustenance levels. And so the prebate comes into every single qualifying household. People with a valid Social Security number will get it. And this is certainly something that will help lower income class Americans. But at the end of the day, we've got fairness because it happens for all Americans who qualify. So that's the prebate. It's a very important part of creating fairness in our tax plan that rebates people for the fair tax they pay on the basic necessities of life up to the poverty level limit spending based on the size of their household. Now, let's talk about prices. So if you haven't heard this before, then you might be thinking that, okay, well, once the fair tax comes in, all prices are going to go up by 23%. And that's not true. See, right now, we're already paying an embedded tax, which we'll show you in a second, and an income tax. And so what happens is the embedded taxes go out and the fair tax gets it put in. And it's basically a wash. So think about this. Business income taxes and the costs of businesses to comply to the current income tax code get passed off to the consumer. Remember that pair of jeans we spoke about earlier? Well, guess what? Right now, the companies who sell that jeans, when they create their $100 price point, they factor in their taxes and their cost to comply to the tax code as a factor in how they price their product in order to make the money that they choose to make on that pair of jeans. It's a cost. And they pass that off to us. So we're ultimately paying that every time we buy something. And we consider that the embedded tax, and that's approximately 22% on all retail goods. And what will happen is when the fair tax gets implemented, the embedded tax goes away and the fair tax of 23% gets inserted. Now, it's not going to be perfect. In the first year, we project a 6 to 10% increase in prices, but over time, as businesses get more competitive, they'll roll back their prices to pre-fair tax levels, and we'll be better off. So really important to understand that. We don't just raise prices by 23%. That's not going to happen. It's going to go up by 6 to 10%, and then it's going to roll back once competition hits and companies grab more market share by lowering their prices. So if you think about it, everything that we talked about tonight puts both businesses and individuals in a better place, right? We more progressively tax people by only taxing them on what they spend. We tax only consumption. Average American's income goes up by 29%. There's going to be a huge influx of capital coming into the United States as a result. There's going to be a massive job increase, which is going to create more disposable income, which is going to have people spend more and invest more, which is going to increase access to even more capital. So, like, why wouldn't we do this? Like, it just makes sense. By the way, it's money neutral. It's income neutral for the federal government, which means in its first year, federal government will bring in the same amount of money as they bring in that they currently collect right now. And then over time, as the economy booms, they'll bring in a lot more money. So even Congress should like this. Well, why are so many people in Congress against it? Because right now they like the shroud that they live in. They like the fact that we can't see what they're doing with our tax code and manipulating it to their favor. And you know, 50% of lobbyists are tax lobbyists, and they get paid a lot of money, 6 figures, 7 figures, to manipulate the tax code, to lobby the Congress to manipulate the tax code. Well, guess what? If corporate income taxes go away, they don't have a job anymore. So they threaten Congress and saying, don't you go supporting this. We're not going to give you re-election dollars if you support this. We like our $500,000 salary to go schmooze with Congress and get them to manipulate the tax code. And that's exactly what goes on. So these are the people on the screen whose income is impacted by our current tax code and by shifting to the fair tax. So you got a very small minority of people who are holding back the passage of the fair tax, and we've got to change that through our vote. So we've got to think with our vote, ladies and gentlemen. We've got to think with our vote and elect people that will support the fair tax. All right, so that's an overview of the fair tax, and before we move on to our special topic, we're gonna hit on some questions here. So let's go ahead and tackle some of those questions, and then we'll come back to our fair tax. All right. So I'm going to ask my colleague Larry to unmute himself here.
Okay, I'm with you.
Okay, great. So Lewis asks a very straightforward question. What has to happen to pass the fair tax? That's a great question. What do we need? Well, we need Congress to support it. And Larry's going to correct me if I'm wrong here, but we need a majority vote of Congress to support this piece of legislation. Is it majority, Larry, or is it 2/3? What's the number there?
To pass the fair tax is just a majority.
Yeah. And what that means is we have to have grassroots support that put pressure on their elected officials all across the country that says, hey, we're not voting for you, we're not voting you into office unless you support this legislation and sign on as a co-sponsor and agree to do it. So it's a grassroots effort, Louis, and that's why this kind of education is important. So, I mean, that's basically what we need to happen. Larry, do you want to add any more nuances to that or any more points that would speak to that?
Only that the whole idea, Lewis, is to scare your local congressman or woman out of their job if they don't support the fair tax. In other words, put enough pressure on them, have enough supporters in your district to let your congressperson know that they will not get reelected, as Mark had mentioned. And that fear is, I believe, why we've got 85% of the co-sponsors we have now. Mark?
Yeah, thank you. What about state income taxes? Yeah, so I can speak to that. The fair tax has no impact on state income taxes. State governments will make their own decisions on that. It's largely thought that should the federal government eliminate the income tax and replace it with a sales tax, that any state governments that have an income tax will likely make that shift as well. But those decisions will all happen independently at the state level, and there's just no impact there. So if the fair tax is legislation that simply speaks to how the federal government will fund itself going forward. All right. Who will facilitate the fair tax? I don't trust the government to do it. Yeah. Well, Larry, will you speak to that, how that transition will take place?
Sure. Well, the question is who will facilitate it, and that would be a new Department of Sales Tax. I'm not sure the exact title, but a Sales Tax Revenue Department. And they will be the hub, if you will, of the 50 states. The states themselves will administer and enforce the sales tax. 45 states already have a sales tax, so they are well versed on how to handle such a situation. And because of it being done by the states, and because that there are only 18 to 20 million filers as opposed to 120 million filers, it will be much easier to keep track of what the businesses are doing. The businesses who sell retail are the only ones that have any tax obligations as far as collection and payment to the state. So it'll be much easier to catch anyone who's trying to fudge the books, if you will. So the facilitating will be done by the state. The federal government will have this new revenue department, sales tax revenue department, and their job is to coordinate the activity with the states, to meet with the state's representatives once a year and see how things are going, and if there might be some suggestions that would make processing the revenue coming through from the businesses to the states to the feds a little bit easier, a little bit cleaner. And that'll be a work in progress. Mark?
Yep, thank you, Larry. All right, well, let's shift over to our special topic here. We've exhausted the questions, and we thank you for writing them in. If you have more, please write them in. We're going to stick around for as long as we need to answer them. So go ahead and fire away if you have them. So let's take a quick peek at our special topic. In this special topic, we're going to talk about the impact of the fair tax on seniors and retired people. So the first thing to know is that we're already paying 25% more. And quite frankly, some of these points are true for everybody, not just seniors. But it'd be real important for seniors to understand that we're double paying right now. We've got an income tax, and in effect, we're paying a sales tax because of business income taxes and costs to comply to the current tax code being passed off to the consumers and reflected in the price tag of everything we buy. So one thing to really understand is we're all in, and certainly seniors are in a much better position by eliminating that embedded tax that goes to the price tag in goods right now. So the next point is that there's just no tax liability under the fair tax. So, you know, seniors living off a part-time job or their Social Security income, these go untaxed, right? So, oops, not sure how that happened. Sorry about that. There's just no tax liability now. And again, for all Americans, it's a better place. But certainly for seniors, who many of which are on a very fixed income and a very fixed budget, to take home 100% of what they earn, either in a part-time job or through their Social Security income, is important to understand that there's just no withholdings whatsoever. And then you've got the prebate. The prebate is a whole new income stream that comes into every qualifying American's household, including seniors. So if you've got a two-person household, then, you know, roughly, the number isn't fresh in my head, but somewhere around $500 or $400 to $500 is going to be coming into your household every single month, reimbursing you on the fair tax you would have spent on the basic spending that you do when you're at the grocery store, or on health services, or you know, transportation, or whatever it might be. So you're taking home 100% of your money. You've got the prebate coming in as a brand new revenue stream. By the way, you can purchase used goods like a new home or clothing or vehicle, and there's no fair tax levied on that, because the fair tax is only levied on new goods and services, not on used goods. And this is interesting too. The COLA formula is modified. So, Larry, I'll ask you to speak to that.
Yes, the legislation actually modifies the COLA formula so that any increase in prices as a result of inflation, which is an ongoing lifetime thing, whatever the increase in sales tax would be because of that increase in cost of living, seniors and other people on the on Social Security disability, etc., will not have any liability under the fair tax. Whereas now, as you had mentioned earlier, we're already paying 20 to 25% in embedded costs that we don't even see. It's just part of what we have to pay at the register, and that goes away when the fair tax is implemented. So it's as simple as that, Mark. It's just making certain that seniors, most of them who are actually living at or close to the poverty level, don't feel any burden of the national sales tax. Mark?
Yeah, thank you, Larry. You know, our last point here is that, and this is a big one for seniors, it's for seniors, they reach a point in their life where they begin to take money out of their pre-tax investments. So under our current income tax system, that money, of course, would be taxed. And so there's a lot of seniors right now sitting with a whole bunch of investments in cash that are in these pre-tax investments, and under the fair tax, they would increase their take out of that by significantly, depending on the investment, of course, because there's no capital gains taxes and no income tax. So that's a big one for a lot of seniors who've done well to save or do some investing. That's another big one. So look, at the end of the day, like, everybody's better off, and certainly seniors are no different. And, you know, hopefully we laid out a number of really solid points here that gets you understanding why that's the case for seniors. All right. So before we answer your questions, you know, we want to just say to everybody on the line, we appreciate you being here, and there's ways that you can really get involved, and we've got to, this has got to become something that you actually do something with beyond just listening to this presentation. And that's a great place to start, is to get educated. But if this resonates with you, then don't just let it be something where you say everybody else will do it. Get involved. So you can go to fairtax.org and flfairtax.com. That's the Florida Fair Tax Association that Larry and I are part of at the state level. And there's just a lot of information there, so it's a great place to go and get educated. You can go there to fairtax.org and find and look for grassroots, and then find a local FairTax organizational group. And if you don't have one in your area, you could start one. You could bring people to this webinar the fourth Thursday of every month. You could give your time by volunteering at events locally, and go to fairtax.org and give your money. Get on a monthly recurring contribution. I mean, $10. If we had another 100,000 people giving just $10, I mean, we'd be in a position to advertise more and put a lot more influence on our elected officials. So go get involved, and these are great ways for you to actually go get involved. Here's another slide on this. Communicate regularly with your elected officials, buy the books, read the legislation, order supplies, and open your mouth. That's the big one. Just go start talking to people about this. It's a great conversation starter. Hey, have you heard about the fair tax, the legislation that would eliminate the income tax? Huh? What? What is that? Tell me more. I mean, that's usually how that goes. So, and then you can invite them right here to this webinar, or give them a copy of the book, or send them to the FairTax.org website. It's a brilliant way to do it. All right. So let's just go back and see if we've got any more questions. So this is interesting, a question from Ed, who asks, what tax would be required in buying a farm or ranch land? So Ed, I'm glad you asked that. If land, or for that matter, a piece of property with a structure on it, has already been lived on or built on or used by a farm for business purposes, it's considered a used good, and which means the fair tax has already been levied on it. And once a good, a physical product, in this case it happens to be land, has been, the fair tax has already been levied on it once, forever into perpetuity, for as long as it turns over again, it will never, the fair tax will never be levied on it again. So that's one point. And then the second point, if it's used for business purposes, there's no tax on business, there's no fair tax levied on business-to-business transactions. So if it's just ranch land where an individual purchases it for their personal use and it's already been bought and sold before, used good, no tax levied. If it's used for farming, for a business, no fair tax levied, because business-to-business transactions don't count. So you're safe there on either accord. How does the fair tax affect Medicare and Social Security that comes out of our check? Great question. So number one, that's what we call withholding. And as we've shared a couple of times here tonight, those withholdings go away. So you get 100% of your paycheck. So that's point one. Point two, the fair tax is revenue neutral, meaning it collects enough money to fund the federal government, including paying out Medicare and Social Security. In fact, it will save Medicare and Social Security, because as the economy booms under the fair tax and the federal government collects more money, it will have more money to continue funding these massively expensive programs. So yeah, there's a real positive impact there. So question got written in, what makes it different from the flat tax? We talked about this up front. It's totally different from the flat tax. The flat tax still taxes income at just a flat rate across the board for everybody. The fair tax eliminates income taxes altogether, repeals the 16th Amendment, which eliminates Congress's ability to tax income. So Huge difference. Really important to know that. And Ron made a comment that people can call into radio talk shows too as a way to publicize the fair tax. A great point. Thank you, Ron. All right, well, we have exhausted all the questions, Larry, so I want to invite anyone to go ahead and type in anything that they've got here. We'll continue to stay on the line and answer them. But I will also ask my colleague Larry to share anything he'd like and to give him the floor for just a minute to see if there's anything else that he'd like to contribute here.
Sure enough. Wanted to speak to the point, to the question you just answered about what makes it different from the flat tax. The fair tax also, of course, eliminates the IRS, which the income tax requires. And it is not the fair tax, the fair tax eliminates the IRS, which the income tax requires. I misstated that initially. And also, it is not the fair tax legislation that repeals the 16th Amendment, but secondary legislation or sister legislation that would be passed at the same time, which starts the process of repealing the 16th Amendment. But it does cover the bases as you had stated. Lewis just popped in another comment here. He says it sounds like the fair tax could produce a surplus. And you're very observant there, Lewis. It absolutely will, because of the way that our economy will start to grow. In fact, it is projected to increase by 11% over the first 10 years, whereas under the income tax system, it's looking at 4 to 5%. But because of the economy growing like it is, there will be more revenue coming into the federal government than they are getting today. And that's a good thing for many reasons. One is that would mean there's money to support the baby boomers, which are coming into the entitlement system, starting to collect Social Security and Medicare. As it is right now, none of the tax proposals, including the fair tax, are structured to address that issue, the baby boomers coming into the system. So I would hope that that is going to be a very, very large point of a topic of discussion when Congress starts discussing the real reform, which must take place if we're going to save our nation financially. And it's going to require some cutbacks somewhere, as well as some increases in taxes, but that would take place no matter what the tax system is. The taxes are not going to raise just because it's a sales tax. Taxes are going to have to be raised no matter what the tax system is going into the future, because those baby boomers coming into the system, they deserve and they expect to get the entitlements that they have been paying into all of their life. Okay? So it will result in a surplus. The other thing is I would hope that some of that money would be used to start paying down the debt, as opposed to funding new pet projects for what I like to call the rodents in Washington. And that's the people that like to spend money. And that's the other side of the coin. Now, we're talking about the revenue collection side. The other side of that same coin is the budget. And a good balanced budget amendment would certainly help in curtailing a lot of the freelance spending that's been going on for the last 100 years. And thanks for that comment, Lewis. Other than that, looks like you've covered it pretty well. I see that Kerry was on board. I don't know if he's still there. I wanted to ask Kerry, if he's listening and still with us, if he would address that issue about the property. I think you hit all of the bases on that. It does, not taxing the property, the land, the farm, whatever it might be, also meets one of the other prerequisites that the founders had when creating a new tax system, and that is that nothing would be taxed more than once. And so since there has been tax collected on those properties in the past, there would not be a tax on it now. Kerry, if you're there, either raise your hand or type a question.
Yeah, I got him, Larry. I just unmuted him.
Okay.
Hi, Larry and Mark. How do you hear me?
Very good.
Good. Well, I thought Mark covered the question very well. The gentleman was asking specifically about a farm and a ranch, and the implication that I took from that is he's planning to run a business on it, and in this case, it would qualify as a business-to-business, or as the legislation points out, an intermediate sale, whereby it's going to be generating taxes at some point in the future by virtue of the products they produce. If it's a ranch, it's going to be cattle possibly. If it's a farm, then some type of agricultural product, which will eventually be taxed when it's sold to the final consumer in the future. So it would be an intermediate sale. There would be no tax due on it, and any farm equipment and anything else that goes into that farm in order to be able to produce those products that will eventually be sold and utilized by the final consumer. So I thought Mark answered that pretty well, and really have nothing else to add to it. And thank you for the opportunity to come on tonight.
Hey, Carrie, this is Mark here. We've got a unique forum here, and you're somebody who has thrown their hat into the ring. And I'm going to just say that, and if you'd like to expand on that, I want to give you an opportunity, like a quick one, to just share what you've done here, because for everybody else on the line, Carrie is just one of the most tremendous individuals I've ever had the chance to get to meet, and his knowledge of the fair tax is extraordinary, and he's a huge supporter of it. And Carrie is looking to make some really phenomenal changes to this country, starting with the fair tax as a supporter, if he were to move forward into public office. So, Carrie, would you like 60 seconds to just share what you're doing?
Well, absolutely, Mark, and I appreciate the opportunity. For those that do not know, I am, and my name, by the way, is Kerry Bowers, K-E-R-R-Y, last name Bowers, B as in Bravo, O-W-E-R-S, and I declared as an official candidate with the Republican Party as a candidate for President of the United States, which I did in September of 2013, going back that far. Completed all the requisites for an official candidate in accordance with the Federal Election Commission guidelines, and became an official candidate as a Republican candidate on the 28th of April of last year. Now, one of the big problems that candidates like myself have out there is the fact that we are not publicized, and for whatever reason the media chooses to do that, and whatever reason the national political committees choose to do that, but we are not as those what I like to call political celebrities and others that are already in office actually addressed by the media. In fact, I think if you were to listen to a news report tonight, they'll still tell you there's only 4 candidates: Senator Rubio, Senator Cruz, Senator Paul, and Secretary Clinton, that have announced and declared, and that's far from truth. If you went to the Federal Election Commission website today, you would find that there's approximately 274 candidates, my last look. 61 of those are Republican candidates, of which I am one. And the centerpiece of my platform is the fair tax. And one of the things that I was inspired to do almost 5 years ago was to sit down and look at more than just the tax situation in this country today, to look at Medicare, Social Security, our budget, all the other major issues that are before the public today, and that continue to be perpetuated and not really dealt with accordingly by our Congress and our President, but to look at those issues and come up with solutions to them, and solutions in every case that would drive us back to our Constitution, and put together a platform. Unlike most candidates that tend to announce and then come up with a plan, I was inspired to put together a plan first and then announce. And you'll find that information available on my website at www.kerrybowers.com, or under my campaign theme, which is www.restoreamericasblessings.com.
Yeah, and Carrie, let me
really encourage people to go take a look at that, and I thank you very much again, Mark, for the opportunity to say hello.
You're welcome. And one point here, as we look at supporting, influencing the fair tax and moving it forward through our vote, you'll want to look for candidates who actually have the fair tax listed in their and written in their published material. You know, a politician will say just about anything to get a vote. Well, what I love about what Kerry's done, and of course I know Kerry as a stand-up guy, but he and you know, there's some others out there that have actually written on their website, in their printed material, that they're FairTax supporters or co-sponsors. So that's really, really important to know that. So anyway, Carrie, glad you're here. We wish you well, and we'll be waving the flag for you. We got a new co-sponsor today. Thank you, Ron. Senator James Lankford of Oklahoma. So that's exciting. I appreciate you letting us know that. And I think that's it, Larry. So that's all I've got for tonight. I certainly appreciate everyone for being here, for taking time. And as we said, the most importantly, beyond getting educated here, is go do something with this. Don't let this be something that's everybody else takes care of. If it resonates with you and you feel like you can make a huge difference for this country, and I hope our presentation demonstrated that, go do something. Get involved with your time, your money, your mouth, and go influence people. Bring them back to our webinar at the very least. So with that, we thank you. We have a great evening, and we'll be back with you on the 4th Thursday of May. Take care, everyone.